following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives. My name is David Schoeneman and I'm your host on this program. I'm also the alderman for Ward 3 here in Nashua. I hope you've been tuning in over the last few weeks and enjoying the conversations we're presenting here. You know, if you have been, that we normally have a guest in the studio. We've taken a couple of breaks from that in recent weeks, and in fact, in our last episode, if you had a chance to watch, you saw that we were out at the Nashua Airport interviewing the crew of the B-29 Superfortress bomber that was here visiting Nashua a couple of weeks ago. I hope you enjoyed that presentation for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's an important piece of history for you and your children to understand what some of these veterans did and the hardships they endured to guarantee our freedoms here in the United States. Secondly, I hope that you enjoyed getting out to the Nashua Airport, what I like to call your Nashua Airport, to see some great history and to have a chance to participate in wonderful outdoor events. Before I forget, I want to let you know of one other event that's coming up at the Nashua Airport. That will be on July 9th. It's going to be the first annual Experimental Aircraft Fly-In and Show. A fly-in is just a chance for people that have a particular interest in a particular type of airplane to fly into an airport and show their airplanes and talk with the folks who might be interested in seeing them. So this will be at the ramp, on the ramp where the B-29 was, near the restaurant. And it's going to be a show of experimental and home-built airplanes on July 9th. Rain date, July 10th. Starts at 10 a.m. in the morning. And I'll be there, and hopefully we'll have some cameras out there to share that event with you as well. But it's a great opportunity for the family. Today, we're back in the studio, however, and you'll note that there's no guest on today's show. Today will be more of a special edition like I've done once before. A number of weeks ago, I had a program about the pension fund legislation that was going to have, or could have had, a significant impact on the city's budget. That legislation did not pass, and actually the budget moved forward without that legislation being in place. And today we're going to be taking a very careful look at the fiscal 17 Nashua city budget. The city budget is in this book right here. It's about 300 pages long. The mayor submits this budget to the Board of Aldermen for review. There are questions that are asked of each department, and then the committee meets and talks about what changes may need to be made, and then it goes to the full board. The Budget Committee did meet, and if you read the paper on June 22nd, that's the Telegraph, you will have seen that the Budget Committee recommended this budget be passed as submitted, no changes whatsoever. You also noted in the Telegraph article on June 22nd that I was the sole dissenting vote. And I'll explain more about that as we move further into the show. This book represents what I would like to call a tug of war between competing interests. Some might call it a book of compromise, or it's certainly a book of prioritization. What is the most important thing to us and what are less important things to us? But I call it a tug of war because in a city like Nashua, the largest percentage, the vast majority of city funds go to salaries. And in case of a city like Nashua, mostly go to union salaries. This book represents a tug of war between unions, and I don't fault unions, but we need to understand some reality here, between union employees who want more of your money and those of you who are taxpayers in the city of Nashua, like myself, who want to hang on to more of it. I think my particular view is that when taxpayers have more disposable income in their hands, that's better for an economy than if money is simply transferred from one group to another with the associated overhead that goes along with that. And that's what I think is happening here in Nashua. We have a large transfer of taxpayer funds into union salaries. The spending cap for this year, by the way, was 1.3%. This book, the compromise, the tug of war victory in this book, represents raises that were given to employees that exceeded that spending cap. Now, how do you give raises that exceed a spending cap? when wages are the largest portion of a budget and still keep the overall budget underneath the cap? We have to take a look at pulling some services back. And that's what I think happened. How does it happen? How does it happen that the tug of war exists and compromises are made the way they are? It's public knowledge, and you can do the research for yourself, that at least 6 of the 15 currently sitting aldermen have accepted campaign contributions from the teachers union. 6 of them. The fire department union also makes contributions, and there may be other individuals who have taken money from some of those unions. Those unions, we should not be naive, those unions don't give contributions to sitting aldermen without some expectation of support when their contracts come up. And we see that very clearly. If we were to take a look at who makes contributions or which aldermen receive contributions and compare that to their voting record, I think you'd find a pretty high correlation. We'll spend some more time on that issue when the when the teacher's contract comes up for negotiation and for decision in the coming months. Let's take a look at a few slides that I think will help us illustrate what's going on in this fiscal 17 budget. The slideshow that I'm going to present to you is based on numbers that Mayor Lozo presented last year. Mayor Lozo did an excellent presentation for the fiscal 16 budget where she had a number of facts and figures that were laid out in table form. I converted those into a graph form, and in fact, Mayor Donchis this year took some of those same numbers and brought them further into the present day. Last year, of course, the numbers didn't come up to fiscal 16 or 17, and now we're bringing them up. The slides make clear where our money is going and what's happening with this budget. Let's take a look at slide number 1. Slide number 1 is the overall city budget in millions of dollars. And you can see on the bottom we have the years going from 2008 to 2017. These are fiscal years. On the left-hand vertical axis we have dollars, millions of dollars going from 0 up to 300. And you can see that over time the budget line, that blue line, has gone up. Now I'm not getting into the exact figures. I want to present this in graphical form so that you can see what the trend has been. The trends are important. So here we have the budget going up on a consistent slope for the last 8 years, 9 years. Slide number 2 shows the tax rate per $1,000. 2016 is estimated. But you can see that's a red line, and that too, for the same time period, has been going up. Any of you who are taxpayers at home are well aware of this curve. 2 things happen that affect our taxes. One is the tax rate escalates, which you see here, and the other thing is there's a periodic revaluation in the city. And that happened a couple of years ago where many of you experienced a large tax increase while there was no corresponding rate increase. That's because the city went through, revalued properties, and raised the valuation, which effectively raises how much you are paying in taxes, even though at that particular moment the rate increase didn't match what you actually paid in extra. Now, I bought my house in 2010. My house was revalued in 2010, so I had a minimal impact from the revaluation that occurred. I believe it was in 2013. But we do see the tax rate increasing. And in fact, it's a tax rate increase coupled with the changes to the tax base that will develop another number that we're going to take a look at in just a moment. But here, before we leave this thought here in this slide, we see a tax rate increase that has been what I would say relentless. Some people, by the way, say that we have a stable tax rate, and they say our goal is to maintain a stable tax rate. That picture you're seeing in front of you is not a stable tax rate. It's a steadily increasing tax rate. The only thing that's stable is the rate of increase. And this year, it's going to be about 2.5%. This is what we heard from the mayor's presentation a few weeks ago. Let's take a look at the next slide. Slide number 3 begins to take a look at this budget book that I spoke about earlier, and it asks the question, where is this money going? Again, we see a trend. This is wages, all Nashua city employee wages in millions of dollars. The band from 2009 to 2015 is interpolated. It's basically smoothing the line. There may have been some variation in that, but the endpoints are in the same places as you see here. Again, we're not looking to see exactly what the number is, although you can see for fiscal 17 it's around $130 million. The overall budget, by the way, is $263 million, and so we're seeing that wages make up a large portion of the budget. Again, the red line trends up consistently. Now, how have your wages done in the last 8 or 10 years or more? Most people are not seeing raises that are this steady over this period of time. When I was working at various businesses in Boston or in New York City, some people got a raise of 2 or 3%. They considered that to be very, very fortunate. And these were back in boom years. Here, as you know, if you've been following city politics, we know that some of the city contracts have some very, very generous wages, generous in comparison to what the private sector has been able to do for its employees. So we have wages that continue to rise, and this is total wages, not just hourly wages, but wages as the number of people employed by the city has also increased. So far we have the budget going up, we have tax rate going up, and now we see wages going up. Let's take a look at another big cost driver in this budget book, in this tug of war that I spoke about earlier. The next slide. Here we see some movement in a direction that we'd actually like to see. I made this line green for that reason. Benefits. This is employee benefits. Employee benefits have not kept pace with the private sector. As many of you know, if you work in the private sector, you know that things changed very dramatically in the private sector, particularly with regard to health insurance, how health insurance is paid for, how many vacation days, how many sick days, how you can accrue sick days or cash them out, all those kinds of things factor into what the benefits are. Now, the city has done a good job, and I certainly will commend them for that, in bringing that budget line, getting it to trend down, but it's still much higher than it would be for the private sector. Wages up, benefits down slightly over the same time period. But here's a big one, pensions. This next slide, pensions in millions of dollars. Again, 2009 to 15 interpolated, because the data wasn't available to the best of my ability to find it. And over that same period of time, we see a red line tracking up pretty dramatically. Wages up, pensions up. This is an employment compensation package, and whether you couple that with benefits, that really is very, very generous. And we like to be generous with people. We like to be generous with people. But when we have factors that are driving up our costs that are in excess of spending cap limitations, the only way to fit rising pensions and rising salaries into a budget that it's limited by the spending cap is to remove other things that are actually of good benefit to the folks at home. I would include things like paving, which of course can be a sore subject for a lot of folks. We have a lot of potholes and bad streets in the city. So to make room for rising pensions that we see here and the rising wages that we saw before, certain sacrifice has to be made if we're going to stay within the cap, especially when the increases that I'm pointing out exceed the rate of the cap. Let's take a look at another slide here. This is the operations portion of the budget. It's colored yellow, cautionary. Notice how flat it is. Operations is everything else. This is the paving. This is supplies for the trash trucks. This is trash trucks. It's all of the things that are not caught up in wages, benefits, and pensions. This is the service level that's delivered to the city. So you'll notice that as the budget has gone up, as the tax rate has gone up, as salaries have gone up, as pensions have gone up, even as some benefits have tracked downward, the operations line, the real benefit to the taxpayer, has stayed flat. I think that's very problematic. Essentially, we're paying more for the same services. And indeed, when I was walking around Ward 3 campaigning in 2013 for my first time election into the Board of Aldermen, a common theme that I heard was that people got tired of taxes going up with no expansion in services. I have another slide here just to summarize the last few. This is a slide with 3 lines. The blue line on top, actually we have the same scale on the bottom, 2008 to 2016 in this case, because the numbers aren't all in for 2017. We have millions of dollars on the left, and we have percentages on the right. The blue line is a line that depicts the amount raised by taxes. Now, the amount raised by taxes is the tax rate that we each have times the assessed value of the property. And as assessments change, and even though the tax rate may not change, as assessments change and go up, the amount raised by taxes will go up. So this is not strictly a tax rate line, and it's not strictly an assessed value line. It's the assessed value times the tax rate to show what portion of the budget is coming from taxes. And you'll note that blue line tracks up. The yellow line at the bottom is the same line we had a moment ago. This is the operations portion of the budget, which is what we're actually getting for the money that we're spending. The fat red line in the middle is a new line, and that's what I would call a value index. It just takes the blue line value and divides it by the yellow line. It's basically taking the amount that we spend and taking a look at how much we get for what we spend. If this were a package of meat in the supermarket, it would be like price per pound. And you take how much the meat cost and you divide it by how many pounds there are, and you'd say, well, this is the price per pound. And if the price per pound or what you spent on meat went up like the blue line and what you got was the yellow line, you'd say, well, the price per pound has not been favorable to me. It's that kind of analogy. So we have amount raised by taxes in the blue line, and we have what we get for it in the yellow line, and we divide that out. We get a value index. That's the fat red line. And notice which direction it's been going, generally speaking. It's been trending downward. The percentages on the right-hand side pertain to that red line. So for fiscal 16, for instance, you can see there's approximately 32%, something like that as a number. Again, we're not looking at hard numbers. We're looking at trends that these lines represent. You will note there's a very, very slight uptick in 2016 value index. That's good, but we have a long ways to go. In summary, blue line tracks up. That's the amount raised by taxes. Yellow line, relatively flat. That's what we get for the money that we spend. And the red line is the value line. It's gone down. That's because while our services have remained unchanged, we have been paying our employees, our union employees who make contributions to members of the Board of Aldermen to secure their favor, if not their vote when the time comes. You can be the judge of that. To secure their favor when union contracts come up. And we have had union contracts providing wages that go up faster than the spending cap percentage. And as a result, we're spending more and getting the same or having a decrease in value. Those are the slides. They're based on what we saw last year in the fiscal 16 presentation by Mayor Lozo, and some of the same numbers that were presented by Mayor Donches this year. Again, I commend them both for the transparency. I've simply taken those numbers, converted them to graphical form. Take one more close look at those slides, and I'll have some more thoughts for you. I find those slides very eye-opening. At least they certainly were for me as I was constructing them. When I took a look at the numbers that were presented before, I thought, what would this look like in graph form? And I started mapping it out or drawing it out here, and I was surprised. And you may be too. In particular, the red line we saw on the last slide is deeply troubling. Now, where is all this money going? We're taking a look at the overall city budget. We know it's going to wages and pensions, but what about by department? The overall city budget for this year is going to be $263.8 million. By the way, when that legislation, the pension fund legislation, did not pass, that effectively protected you, the taxpayer, from additional $2.2 million that could have been spent. Instead of the budget being 263, it could have been $2 million larger. But it is $263.8 million. I'm glad the protection that the failure of the pension fund legislation granted us, but it's still a big number. Of that, 137 million, in fact, more than 50%, goes to schools. Now, I say schools, I don't say education. They go to schools. 11% goes to the police department, and 9% goes to fire. 11 and 9%, those are big numbers too, but they're not the lion's share. The lion's share is schools. And I think that realistically, if we want to try to find a better value number in that fat red line we saw before, the best place to look is at schools. But before I leave police and fire, let me speak about them for just a moment. Some of those salaries are pretty high. We have a very good police department. I think we have certainly a good fire department as well. The police chief, I think maybe the fire chief, may have wanted more personnel, but they made the choice to increase salaries where they can rather than add people. So there's been no increase in police service, no increase in fire service, but there's been a stable line of good service from both departments, even though at a higher cost. But again, that's only 11% and 9% for police and fire, respectively. In the school department, $137 million, over 50% of our entire budget, which means over 50% of your tax bill, is going to schools. And where do schools stand up? Schools, as you know, if you've been listening or watching some of the shows we've had on here in the past, schools are not faring as well. We don't have the same quality in our schools as we do in our police department, for instance. In fact, Nashua School District is ranked in the bottom 20% in the state of New Hampshire. These are not rankings that I make. They're not rankings that an independent agency makes. This is based on numbers that are provided by the various school departments to the New Hampshire Department of Education and to the U.S. Department of Education. It's gathering those numbers, mining that data, where we find that our schools are actually ranked not so well. What about value? We've had folks on the show in the last few weeks, again, I hope you've been watching, where we've taken a look at some of the charter schools to see what kind of value can be gotten. How much does good education cost? At the Academy for Science and Design, for instance, we found out that a good education, in fact, the best public education in the state, which is provided by the Academy for Science and Design, costs approximately $6,000 per pupil per year. The Nashua Public School District, the regular public schools, we find that the average student cost is roughly $13,000. So $13,000 per pupil per year to be in the bottom 20%, and $6,000 per pupil per year to be number one in the state. Now, I know that other folks, some other folks on the Board of Aldermen and folks listening at home may say, well, there are a lot of other factors. Well, it's true, there are. But to say that we can't make any improvement at all, I think is not being truthful. But why? Why do we get stuck in the rut of continuing to pay more for these services? I think it gets back to what I mentioned earlier about the numbers, the 6 aldermen, current sitting aldermen, who accept donations from teachers' union, and others who may accept donations from other unions. Again, it would be naive to think that those donations are not made with some expectation of support. And I think that's what's happening. I want to share a couple of emails that have come to me recently, and these pertain to the budget cycle that we're going through, and I think also pertain to the question on education that I just spoke of a moment ago. This one came to me back in March, and this is from a woman named Ann. There are 3 of us on our street who are going to be selling our homes in the near future. There is a property at number 44 up for auction today. Trulia, of course, is one of the real estate valuation websites you can go to and take a look. You can look your own home up on Trulia and see what the values are like. Trulia has it listed with a low rating for the nearby junior high school. Why is this, and can anything be done to change it? I've gotten back to Ann. I explained to her some of the situation, some of the factors that affect this. In fact, she's talking about Pennachuck Middle School. Pennachuck Middle School is not ranked very high. It's ranked number 86 out of 107 public schools in the state, and that's the bottom 20th percentile On a scale of 0 to 5, with 0 being good, Pennachuck gets a number 1. So here we have a very expensive school system that's affecting a constituent in Ward 3's property value. Take a look at your own property. Put your own address into Trulia or Zillow and see what the effect is on your property value of the schools in Nashua. I put my own property in there and I saw that the effect was definitely negative. It doesn't say how much negative, but the effect is definitely negative. I think we need to work on that. Secondly, I've got an email from another constituent by the name of William. William writes and said to me just today, as a matter of fact, yesterday rather, actually today, talked about Social Security. He said the Social Security recipients can expect to receive 0.2% increase this year, and it was 0% last year. Social Security, of course, is what we're all expecting when we retire, not to carry all of our expenses or cover all of our expenses, but it is an important factor. We've paid into that, and we see the escalation, which is probably based on inflation, was 0% last year and is 0.2% this year. At the same time, we have a tax rate that's going up about 2.5%, and it's going up because wages have tracked higher and faster than the indices have, in our case, the spending cap. And pensions, of course, have tracked faster too. These are very lucrative compensation packages for some of the folks. And it results in the predicament that I think that we're in, where we have a budget that continues to grow, we have a tax rate that continues to rise, and we have flat operations portion of the budget. And again, operations can be things like paving. The budget for paving in this book was about $2 million, a little bit over $2 million, and it's been that way. But we're going to be hearing from some experts who are coming in to take a look and tell us what our paving needs are, and apparently we would need to spend $10 million per year. Where are we going to find the $10 million when we continue to do what we're doing? So this comes back to my comment in the beginning of the show, where I said that in the budget meeting last week, I was the only dissenting vote. I dissent because I don't want to see that red line tracking down. I don't want to see our value decreasing while personnel costs, which really comes down to wages and pensions, continue to rise while operations remain flat. Well, folks, that's it for today's show. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for your interest in what's going on in your city of Nashua and for your interest in the Board of Aldermen. I would encourage you to take a look at your own property value, put your own address into Zillow or Trulia and see what comes up. Do your own research on the schools and contact your alderman. You can also go down to City Hall. You can go to the clerk's office and you can find the campaign financing reports that are available. Each one of the aldermen has to file a couple reports a year, certainly during campaign season. And that's where I got the information that I shared with you. Again, we'll have more for that because I think it's going to be a factor as we take a look at the teacher's contract that'll be coming up. If you have any comments or concerns that you'd like to share with us, please email me at perspectivesnh@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.